If you think you can handle the truth, maybe you shouldn't watch this alone. There's a house in Amityville, New York, ordinary from the outside. White walls, a slanted roof, and two crescent-shaped windows staring like cold eyes. But inside, something waits. Almost 50 years ago, 6 members of the DeFeo family were murdered in their beds. The eldest son claimed he heard voices that told him to kill. The world called it a tragedy. Some call it a curse, because a year later, another family moved in and reported shadows moving on their own, cold spots that froze the blood, and whispers that called their names, even when they were alone. The truth is darker than any movie. Tonight, we open that house again. The doors are unlocked, the lights are off, and for the next few minutes, you will hear what really happened inside the most haunted house in America. Welcome to the Amityville murders. If you dare step deeper into the darkness, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on the bell. You'll need it. November 13th, 1974. A cold, crisp night blanketed the town of Amityville, New York. Streetlights cast long, hesitant shadows on quiet roads. The kind of night where the wind whispered through the trees, and the leaves seemed to shiver under an unseen breath. At 112 Ocean Avenue, the DeFeo family home sat quietly. White siding, a slanted roof, and those now infamous crescent-shaped windows. From the outside, nothing seemed unusual. From the inside, fear had already begun to stir. Ronald DeFeo Jr., the eldest son, was awake that night. He was restless, pacing his bedroom. There was a tension in the air that no one could see, but he could feel it. An oppressive weight pressed down on his chest. A whisper, almost imperceptible, seemed to crawl along the walls. A voice in the shadows, or perhaps just his imagination. No one knew the horror that was about to unfold. Shortly after 10 p.m., the calm shattered. Gunshots ripped through the house. Not one, not two, but 6 times. A rhythm of terror echoing from room to room. Each shot precise. Each shot final. 6 members of the DeFeo family were struck down in their beds. Ronald's father, Ronald Sr., the stern patriarch, laid on his mattress, unaware of the imminent violence. His mother, Louise, the nurturing heart of the family, was next. Dawn, Allison, Mark, and John, each child meeting the same sudden, inexplicable fate. Neighbors later described the silence that followed the shots. No screams, no chaos, just a town suspended in disbelief, and a house holding its breath. When the first officers arrived, the scene was worse than anyone could imagine. Blood had stained the bedsheets. But strangely, the rooms were undisturbed otherwise. No struggle, no forced entry, just a sense of unnatural order, as if something beyond comprehension had orchestrated the events. Ronald DeFeo Jr. was taken into custody without incident. Even then, his calm was eerie. He told officers, matter-of-factly, that voices had spoken to him, voices that commanded him to commit the unthinkable. At first, authorities dismissed it as a delusion, a fabricated story to escape responsibility. Yet the tension in his eyes, the cold detachment in his voice, left even seasoned officers unsettled. The house itself seemed to react to the tragedy. Windows rattled in rooms where no one was. Doors creaked open for no reason, and the faint smell of something, burned yet sweet, lingered in the hallways. It was as if the house remembered what had happened, as if it was alive, and it was angry. The community struggled to comprehend the horror. Friends, neighbors, and relatives whispered about the events. How could a young man, only 23 years old, kill his entire family? How could such silence follow such violence? The questions were endless, and the answers scarce. Investigators meticulously combed the scene. They documented everything: the bullet trajectories, the positioning of the bodies, the locks on doors, and the untouched furniture. Yet nothing could explain the eerie calm of the house. The night itself seemed to shiver under the weight of what had transpired. Rumors began to circulate almost immediately. Some locals claimed the house was cursed, that it had always been somehow different. Others whispered about strange figures seen moving behind the windows late at night, about shadows that lingered too long, and about the voice that had spoken to Ronald, a voice that refused to leave even when the authorities tried to understand. Inside the station, during questioning, Ronald remained unerringly consistent. He described hearing whispers, not just one voice, but many, voices that instructed him, to do things he could barely comprehend. They came from walls, from shadows, from the corners of the rooms where no one else could see. The officers exchanged uneasy glances. The DeFeo home, once a family residence, was now a labyrinth of horror and grief. Neighbors began reporting strange occurrences in the surrounding area. Dogs refused to approach the house. Children who passed by screamed without provocation. Even the police admitted to feeling uneasy when inside. Over the following hours, as investigators pieced together the crime, a faint, almost imperceptible sound could be heard upstairs. A whisper, asking questions, taunting. "Why did you leave me?" The voice was gone when they searched. Yet the echo lingered in their minds long after leaving the property. The DeFeo murders marked the beginning of a story that would haunt generations. Not just a tale of violence, but of a house that seemed to hold a memory. A house that remembered blood. A house that remembered fear. And that night, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue stopped being just a home. It became a legend, a warning, a place where the line between human horror and something darker blurred forever. Even today, decades later, the house still stands, and those crescent-shaped windows still stare out, as if watching, waiting, reminding the world that some places never forget, and some darkness never leaves. The question remains, was it Ronald DeFeo who committed the murders alone? Or was there something more, lurking in the shadows of 112 Ocean Avenue? Something that whispered in voices no one else could hear. Something that continues to linger, waiting for the next family to step inside? That night in 1974 was only the beginning, and what followed would turn a simple murder case into the most infamous haunted house story in America. When a year passed after the DeFeo murders, the world had moved on, but 112 Ocean Avenue had not. It remained empty, silent, brooding. Then, in December 1975, a new family arrived. George and Kathy Lutz, with their 3 children, purchased the infamous house for far less than its value, a bargain that would soon seem impossible. At first, everything appeared normal. The exterior was clean. The interior smelled faintly of dust and old wood. Yet the first night, something didn't feel right. The family noticed it immediately, though they tried to ignore the unease. George Lutz recounted feeling an oppressive weight in the air, a sense that the house was alive. Even the children sensed it. They complained of strange drafts in rooms where no windows were open, cold spots that chilled the air despite the heating being on. On the second night, the first sounds appeared. Soft thumps from the upstairs, like footsteps pacing across empty rooms. Doors slammed by themselves. Lights flickered without explanation. Kathy began to sense a presence, an invisible figure moving near her while she slept. It was subtle at first. Small things. Objects shifted from their places. A chair tilted ever so slightly. A picture crooked on the wall. Yet these minor disturbances slowly escalated into something more unsettling. By the end of the first week, George awoke to strange sensations. He felt icy fingers brush his arm while he slept, heard guttural murmurs coming from the hallways, and smelled the unmistakable odor of decay that no source could explain. Kathy Lutz began to notice more than just cold spots. She described whispers in the dead of night, sometimes chanting, sometimes speaking her name, echoing from places no one could see. Doors would lock themselves. Drawers opened on their own. And sometimes, the children claimed to see dark figures standing at the foot of their beds. The family tried to rationalize it. Drafts, old wiring, their imagination. But the unease continued to grow. George and Kathy began documenting the occurrences, writing notes, capturing sounds on tape, trying to understand what was happening in their new home. It wasn't just the family who noticed the strange events. Neighbors reported odd phenomena around the house. Lights flickering inside when no one was home. Shadows moving behind curtained windows. Dogs barking at nothing. Even mailmen avoided the property after dark. One night, George set up cameras to capture the activity. What he recorded would horrify him. Footage showed objects moving on their own. A rocking chair swaying in a silent room. Doors opening and closing without explanation. And in the corner of one shot, a shadowy figure, impossible to identify, lingered near the staircase. It was during these first weeks that the family realized they were not alone. Something in the house was aware of them. Watching. Waiting. The children's experiences intensified. They spoke of a man standing in dark corners. Silent. watching them. At night, they would wake to find their beds pushed against the wall, as if some unseen force had rearranged the furniture. George reported hearing guttural whispers from the walls, threatening, mocking, and sometimes pleading. Kathy described waking to find windows and doors open in the dead of night. Objects were thrown across rooms. Mirrors reflected images that weren't there. And one night, she saw a figure sitting in the corner, its face obscured in shadow, staring at her for what felt like hours, until she blinked and it was gone. Even the family dog behaved strangely, refusing to enter certain rooms, growling at empty walls, and barking uncontrollably at corners of the house that seemed alive. By the second month, George and Kathy knew they could no longer deny what was happening. They invited a priest to bless the home. The priest reportedly felt a profound sense of evil, telling the Lutz family that some presence in the house was malignant. Yet even after prayers, the occurrences persisted. The story of the Lutz family quickly spread. Journalists came to investigate. Neighbors whispered, and the legend of Amityville grew, blending fact and speculation. One chilling evening, George woke to a figure standing at the foot of his bed. It did not move. It did not speak. It merely watched. Frozen in terror, George dared not breathe. The presence lingered until dawn, then disappeared without a trace. Other strange events were recorded. Faint whispers on tape. Objects moving. Cold spots that left frost on furniture. The family reported feeling drained, anxious, and watched constantly. Soon, they realized the house did not want them there. It was as if it resented the intrusion. Every attempt to normalize life failed. The supernatural occurrences intensified with time. It was during this period that investigators, journalists, and paranormal experts arrived to document the activity. Footage, interviews, and reports showed a house that seemed capable of interacting with the family in subtle, terrifying ways. Walls vibrated inexplicably, lights turned on and off without reason, and objects would appear in rooms where they had never been before. By the third month, the family's mental and emotional state deteriorated. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, and fear became constant companions. The children were too afraid to go to certain rooms. George reported hearing voices speaking in languages he didn't understand. Kathy felt watched even while outside in the yard. They realized leaving was the only way to survive. In April 1976, after 28 days, the Lutz family fled the house, leaving behind all their possessions. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue remained, silent, waiting, its shadows and whispers lingering in the corners of rooms. The Lutz family's experiences became the foundation of the Amityville Horror. But beyond the films, books, and sensationalized reports, the true horror lies in the real events. The whispers, the cold spots, the shadows, and the lingering presence that refuses to leave. Even today, decades later, people claim the house is haunted by the tragedies of the past. The murders of the DeFeo family and the subsequent torment of the Lutz family created an energy that some say never dissipated. For those who step inside, or even gaze through the windows, the feeling is the same. A weight on the chest, a whisper in the ear, a sense that the house is aware, and it remembers. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue is no longer just a structure of wood and nails. It is a living memory of blood, fear, and darkness. It is a warning, a reminder that some places never forgive, and some darkness never lets go. By the time the haunting had fully manifested, the Lutz family had endured weeks of terror. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue was no longer simply a home. It had become a presence, watching, waiting, whispering. Even outside, the air around the property seemed heavier, charged with unease. Neighbors noticed shadows flickering across the windows at night, lights turning on and off without explanation, and a deep, inexplicable sense of dread that radiated from the building. Objects moved on their own. Drawers opened by themselves. Doors slammed without warning. Whispers echoed through the halls, always at the edge of hearing. George Lutz recalled nights waking to the sound of footsteps pacing the floors while he was alone. Kathy felt icy fingers brushing her skin in the dead of night, while shadowy figures lingered silently in doorways, hallways, and corners. The children, terrified, spoke of menacing shapes standing over them in their rooms. Attempts to document the activity only seemed to provoke the house further. Cameras captured objects moving seemingly with intent. Lights flickered in synchrony with the investigators' questions. Microphones recorded whispers in languages the family could not understand. Chairs rocked as if guided by unseen hands. Doors opened and closed on their own, and faint scratches appeared along walls and floors, marks that no one could explain. Kathy even reported seeing faces in mirrors that disappeared when looked at directly, while George discovered symbols etched faintly into floorboards overnight. Investigators and journalists arrived, drawn by reports of the paranormal. They experienced firsthand the oppressive energy of the house. One local priest refused to stay overnight, describing a palpable malevolence within the walls. Other investigators noted a series of knocks and raps that answered questions posed aloud, as if the house itself were speaking. The psychological toll on the family became impossible to ignore. Kathy suffered recurring nightmares reflecting the prior murders. George felt constantly watched and unable to rest. The children withdrew, terrified of the darkness and the corners of the home. Patterns began to emerge. Certain rooms were more active than others. The basement and the small upstairs room where Ronald DeFeo had allegedly heard voices seemed particularly aggressive. Lights flickered, objects flew, and shadows lingered in those spaces, while other rooms maintained a subtler, yet still unnerving, activity. The house seemed to have divided its energy, assigning a different type of fear to each room, as if the building itself was alive and calculating. Neighbors continued to report eerie phenomena. One claimed to see a figure at the upstairs window late at night. Another heard a voice calling their name when the house appeared empty. Even police officers admitted feeling a profound unease when entering the home, despite the absence of evidence to support any conventional explanation. Media attention soon arrived. Local newspapers ran stories on the haunted house, and national outlets picked up the tale. The mix of a real-life family massacre and the alleged paranormal activity fascinated the public. Some skeptics attempted rational explanations: drafts, faulty wiring, or psychological stress. Yet even those unwilling to believe in ghosts reported feeling watched, anxious, or unsafe within the house. Recordings and photographs taken by the family and investigators captured activity that defied rational explanation. Shadows appeared in frames where no one stood. Objects moved intelligently, as if with purpose. Voices spoke in response to questions. The house seemed to react to the presence of its occupants and observers alike, almost sentient in its awareness. As the days passed, the haunting intensified. The family awoke to strange phenomena in the middle of the night. Beds moved slightly, doors opened and closed, and cold spots chilled rooms even with the heat on. Whispers became clearer, sometimes calling their names, sometimes warning them, sometimes simply repeating phrases in languages unknown. The children, once playful, became fearful of their own home, reluctant to sleep or enter certain rooms. George felt a pressure in his chest that never left, a constant reminder of the house's invisible weight. Even outside, the house exerted its influence. Mail carriers refused to approach after dark. Pets reacted to unseen presences, and neighbors reported a suffocating aura around the property, as if the shadows of past horrors lingered just beyond sight. The Lutz family realized the home was no longer a shelter. It had become a prison of psychological and supernatural torment, a place that seemed to feed on their fear and anxiety. The family decided that leaving was the only solution. After 28 harrowing days, they fled, abandoning their possessions. Cameras and tapes revealed objects shifting, lights behaving strangely, and unexplained sounds following them even as they packed their belongings. The house remained, silent yet alive, its shadows and whispers lingering in empty rooms, waiting for the next unwitting family. The story of 112 Ocean Avenue became more than legend. It was a living memory of violence, fear, and darkness. The combination of the DeFeo murders and the Lutz family's torment created a legacy that continues to capture imaginations and terrify those who dare to explore its history. People who pass the house today describe an unsettling feeling, a weight on the chest, a whisper just beyond hearing, a sense that the building itself remembers what occurred within its walls. The house at 112 Ocean Avenue is no longer merely wood and nails. It is a monument to tragedy, to evil that may not be human in origin, and to a darkness that refuses to leave. And though decades have passed since the events of 1974 and 1975, the story remains alive, haunting the corners of memory, legend, and perhaps even the very structure of the building itself. For those who would dare to step inside, or even gaze through its windows, the sensation is immediate and chilling. An oppressive presence, a reminder that some places never forget, and some darkness never releases its grip. Witness to the horrors committed within its walls. The echoes of the DeFeo murders and the torment endured by the Lutz family seemed to seep into the very foundation, as if the house itself had absorbed the fear, the grief, and the violence, holding it in perpetual tension. Researchers and paranormal investigators who entered the property in later years reported a sense of suffocating energy. Some heard whispers in empty rooms, subtle yet unmistakable, calling out names that had not been spoken in decades. Others felt cold fingers graze their skin or experienced sudden drops in temperature in rooms that had been warm moments before. The air seemed heavier, charged, almost alive. Cameras captured strange orbs, shadows that moved against logic, and objects appearing in positions that defied explanation. Local folklore grew around the house. Neighbors told stories of lights flickering in the windows long after the Lutz family had left. Some reported hearing cries or laughter when no one else was around. Dogs refused to enter the property, barking at spaces no human could see. The house, though empty, seemed aware. It watched, it waited, it remembered. Experts debated the nature of what haunted 112 Ocean Avenue. Psychologists suggested mass hysteria. Skeptics claimed clever manipulation or coincidence. Yet even those who tried to rationalize it often left shaken, reporting a pervasive sense of dread that followed them outside the property. For many, the house was more than a structure. It was a presence, intelligent, reactive, malevolent. Visitors who dared to enter later described rooms where the shadows seemed to cling, where whispers answered before they finished asking questions. Some reported seeing fleeting glimpses of figures in mirrors or at the end of hallways. Others felt touches, unseen hands, a weight pressing down as if the house itself were trying to communicate, or warn, or punish. The legend of the Amityville Horror has been sensationalized in books, movies, and media reports, but the truth remains darker than fiction. The real story is rooted in blood and terror, a family murdered, a house that remembered, and another family tormented by an invisible presence. It is a story of how human horror and supernatural dread can intertwine, leaving generations questioning what is real and what lies just beyond perception. Even today, the house sits quietly on Ocean Avenue. From the outside, it looks normal. The white siding, the slanted roof, the crescent windows, innocent, unassuming. Yet anyone who has entered or gazed too long through its panes speaks of a sensation impossible to describe. The weight of unseen eyes, the sense that the past is present, the feeling that some darkness never dies. For those who study it, investigate it, or simply hear the story, one question remains. Was it truly Ronald DeFeo Jr. acting alone? Or was there something more, a presence that influenced, whispered, and demanded obedience? The house has never revealed its secrets, and perhaps it never will. As night falls on Ocean Avenue, and shadows stretch across the quiet street, one truth remains undeniable. Some places never forget, and some darkness never releases its grip. If you think this story was intense, you're not ready for the next one. Hit subscribe before the next shadow finds you.